Hey everyone, welcome. Great to see you all here, and thanks so much for joining the June DataHub Town Hall. For anyone new, I'm Lakshmi, developer advocate here at DataHub, and I will be your host. Quick housekeeping before we dive in, we have turned on the chat and Q&A this time, so please jump in, say hi, tell us where you are joining from, and drop any questions in there as we go. We'll get to them through the session and at the end. So do make this interactive. We love hearing from you. All right, let's get into it. To kick us off with some community updates, I will hand it over to Alisa, our chief of staff. So, Alisa, over to you.
Hi everyone, happy to see you in June. And thanks Lakshay for the introduction. So I'll give you a very quick community update. Over the past few weeks, we actually had a massive turnout at two of the biggest data conferences of the year, Snowflake Summit and Databricks Summit here in San Francisco. So at Snowflake, we had a strong presence. DataHub wrapped ride shares were circling Moscone Center. There was like an aerial banner over the conference. We met so many customers and community members eager to try our products at the conference. And then at the Databricks Summit, the energy was also just as strong. We had so many fantastic conversations from all the meetings and felt the energy firsthand. We couldn't have finished these events strong without our community members. So thank you again for all your support. Moving on to the next page is like a preview of what we have planned for the upcoming month. So we have two great events coming up that I want to make sure everyone knows about. Firstly, on July 7th, we have a partner webinar with ScaleFree. So Lawrence from ScaleFree and Tim from DataHub will be presenting. If you or anyone in your network is interested in the data vault space, this is a great one to share and attend. Registration link is on the screen, and we'll also post in the Zoom chat and Slack channel. Then on July 9th, we have a Chicago meetup with Optiver. This will be an evening focused on building the context layer your agents can trust. So Shushanka, our co-founder and CTO, will be presenting alongside Christoph from Optiver. This is a practitioner-focused event and also a great way to connect with folks in the financial services and trading space. Again, registration link is on the screen and will be sent again in the Zoom chat and Slack channel. So these are exactly the kind of community touch points where we can hear directly from you. So I highly encourage you to attend, and we are really excited to see you all there. With that, I'll hand it over back to Lakshay to continue our town hall. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, this next one is I'm genuinely excited about. So we are launching a hackathon built with DataHub, the agent hackathon. It's all about AI agents on top of DataHub open source context platform. So there is over $20,000 in prizes. It's fully online and it's open to everyone, so you can participate from anywhere. And it has four challenge tracks to pick from. They will be revealed once the hackathon starts. So it's opens on July 6th. But here is what to do right now. Jump into our Slack community and join Agent Hackathon channel. Link will be shared in the chat. That's where all the details will drop first the moment it launches. So you will be first to know about it. And while you're heading to the Slack, one more thing. We have just rolled out regional chapters so you can connect with folks closer to home. We have got that chapter covering Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, and an India chapter too. And if you would love to lead a chapter for your own region, just reach out. We are generally interested to, guide you how you can do that and love you help you out to set one up. So, okay, let's look at what's on the agenda today. So here is what we have got lined up. First, Cong Wang, Principal Software Engineer at PingCAP, on how TiDB is now a data hub source with a live look at the integration. Then the DataHub team takes us inside the context platform, John, Joyce, Manuela Wei, and Maggie Hays. So, and we have also got a special context 2026 announcement. You won't want to miss that as well. And then we will close with a Q&A. So keep those questions coming in the chat. So let's get started. And I can't think of a better person to kick us off. Kong, the stage is all yours. Let's give him a minute. He'll be just here.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Um, yeah, this is Cong from PingCAP. Let me give this demo. Let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yeah. Let's start from this picture because it explains the core idea of this demo. So the question we want to answer is when an enterprise agent answers a data-related question, where does this context come from? So here we have the DataHub provides the governed source of truth of the data, right? It tells where the agent to or what the data to access, where the data to access. And then in this picture, we have the project MEM9. It is a agentic memory solution, provides a different kind of context. It remembers how you communicate with the agent, and how the team works, the customer preference, the priorities, the decision rules, the communication patterns. That is not always visible to the data catalog. And DataHub says what is true about the data set now. And MEM9 remembered how the organization should use those truths. And in this picture, we have the date layer, which is called TiDB. So that TiDB sits underneath a durable data layer. It can store operational data as well as the agent memory state. So so the data will be communicated in a SQL interface. TiDB is MySQL compatible. So here we have the TiDB here to store the memory data and also as kind of a the data here so that the data hub can communicate with. So and in this demo, we assumed a fictional company scenario called Atlas. Imagine that Atlas is a enterprise customer preparing a CFO-facing QBR update. So I can show you how the data looks like. So now is the TiDB instance. We are trying to we store the data of this Atlas company. So like we have the customer health update, the daily update, and also the customer health QBR. I can show you how the data looks like. Wait a minute. Yeah. So like yeah, this is a kind of some kind of a enterprise customer data, and we are trying to access those data using DataHub and generate some kind of a report. And then the data is here, and also I want to show you the memories we stored by the memory 9, which can be used by the agent. So MEM9 is kind of a memory solution. it remembers the conversation and extract the kind of effect and preferences. As you can see here, we have a we have the insight of those memories, like the freshness, the preference of the CFO, and how we access the data. For example, here we have for Atlas QBR or CFO facing data questions, we should check the freshness and the lineage before making the business claims. So yeah, this is how it works together. And also, then I will give a live demo on how we access those data and making some conclusions with my agent. And yeah, so assume that we wanted to check the customer health QBR dashboard and say if this is okay for a CFO-facing update. So I will copy this prompt and answer my agent. Yeah, so okay, then the agent start trying to working with DataHub. But in this case, I will explicitly that okay, let's do not use the memory, just access the data and give me the answer. So now we have the kind of the answer. Okay, it says that it's okay to use the customer health portion for the update. But we have some stilled data. That's it. And then let's include memory so that we can see how it goes. Now in this way, the agent will try to recall from the memories, and the memories we will combine the memories with the data from DataHub with MCP, so that we have more information and the preference or the more detailed guidance what we should do. For example, we have this. So in the past, DataHub only answer use the dashboard since it is healthy. But with the memory, we know that okay, this it is approved as the governed customer health source, but need owner confirmation. And yeah, that's and also it explicitly says that the owner is Mr. Park. So yeah, that's it. So that's all from my the live demo. And I will give a simple takeaway. So DataHub gives the agent governed metadata truth, owner freshness, overall state, as well as the data details, right? And the MEM9 gives the agent durable operation context, the preference, the priorities, the rules, the communication guidance. And the TiDB provides a durable data and the state layer that agent can access through the SQL compatible protocol. So together, DataHub and MEM9 and TiDB can become a practical ecosystem for agentic context and data access. So the agent can access with the evidence, remember how the team should act, and connect to the real enterprise data instead of like the prompt only concept. Okay, and then that's pretty much all from my side. Maybe I can check with the questions. Where
Awesome.
is that?
Well, thank you very much, Cong. Feel free to check the chat as questions come in. I'm sure they will. I'm going to take
Okay.
over screen share and we're going to move on to the next section.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Joy.
Cong. Awesome. All right, let me share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see my browser right now. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Cong, for starting off the day talking about how you can make agents better by combining DataHub context with operational context. I'm going to continue on that theme and talk a little bit about what the team here at DataHub has been working on over the last few months to essentially broaden DataHub from maybe a more traditional data catalog, data observability tool into something more, a context platform that can serve both humans and AI agents more broadly. I'll be joined by Manuela and Maggie, who will help me talk about, give a demo and give a little overview of where we're going in the future as well. With that, let's get into it. As many of you are probably aware, data analytics agents are all the rage right now, especially in our industry. It's kind of the first use case that's really caught hold in data with the latest and greatest in generative AI and LLMs. We've seen features launched from folks like Snowflake, Databricks. We also see customers building their own text to SQL data analytics agents to essentially allow anyone, whether they're technical or non-technical, to ask a question of the data and get data-backed results in seconds without having to go through all of the manual process that has historically been required to, find the right data, generate a SQL query, visualize the results, all of that, interpret the results. And really, when you think about it, there's kind of two core pieces to the problem when it comes to kind of automating data analytics in this way. The first is the analytics agent has to be able to find the right data to use across a very large, in some cases, data ecosystem, hundreds or thousands, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of tables and millions of columns. Once the agent's able to narrow down on the right data sources to use to answer a given question, it needs to actually go understand what the right patterns are to answer that question. So what that means is understanding common filtering patterns, join patterns, historical queries in order to generate a technically correct, a syntactically correct query, and then it needs to go ahead and execute that. Now, both of those steps in the process require something very important, and that is semantic or business context, right? This is context that has traditionally lived in people's heads oftentimes. A business analyst at an organization often develops an understanding of what the authoritative sources of data are to answer a broad array of questions, and then understands how to actually, query those data sources to answer the most important questions for the business. That same semantic context, business understanding needs to be packaged up and made accessible for AI agents if they're going to have any chance of being able to answer the questions correctly on their own. And as we've worked with customers of DataHub to start deploying analytics agents to production, we've seen a wide variety of failure modes, often caused by a lack of this type of context. For example, AI agents, discovering the wrong sources of data or the wrong logic to produce an important metric. or maybe generating faulty join patterns or incorrect filtering patterns, that don't really include some of the historical context and maybe some of the tech debt that has been accrued by the business over time. Lack of explainability and provenance. So not being able to kind of explain why it chose certain data and why it chose certain patterns. And so we know that analytics agents can deliver a tremendous amount of value, but when you open up a new session with Claude or a new, OpenAI chat, the LLM really has no understanding of your business or its data by default. And so that's really the problem that we see DataHub trying to solve. It's really providing that context so that the agent can give you the right answer every single time, so reliably, as the data ecosystem changes. As we've worked with some early customers who are trying to deploy these types of agents to production, we've really run into those walls with context management. And a few of them are things like fragmentation. So a lot of this semantic context does exist, but the problem is it's in multiple places. There's no consistent way that it's modeled, right? So you have some things that are living in Snowflake and table comments, for example. You have some things that are living in dbt or maybe Looker, sort of as your BI or semantic normalization layer. You have some things in GitHub. Maybe you have a corpus of sample queries that your analysts use. And then you have some things that are in your documents bases, your knowledge bases, things like Confluence and Notion and Google Drive, maybe more about, what the right database to use is in Snowflake for production data. So there's not really a single place that the agent can look to understand how to use the data. So basically to solve those two problems of finding the right data to use and then actually using it. Accessibility, which is related. So the agent doesn't have a single surface it can go to talk to that context. Maybe even more importantly is this idea of validation of some of that context. In the early days, what we saw customers doing is trying to point these agents directly to existing sources of context, places like Slack or Confluence or Notion or their Snowflake directly. And the problem we saw there is that the agent was able to use anything that anyone at the company had ever done or said or thought to answer a question. But that's not necessarily the context that the data team wanted the agent to use in order to correctly answer a given question. And so having, someone in the middle, a human, validating the information that the agent is using to make decisions, I think was a challenge that we saw emerging. And then finally, maintaining this type of business context over time. I mentioned this earlier, but historically, a lot of this context was living in the heads of business analysts. And so, keeping it up to date was not an explicit process. People learned and evolved as the data landscape changed. For AI, the story is a bit different. You have to actually be explicit about declaring this context and continuing to update it. So as the data ecosystem evolves, the agent continues to do the right thing. So basically, it's really a process of taking a lot of that stuff that was buried in people's heads and actually writing it down, right? And publishing it and making it accessible to agents. So these are a few of the challenges that we saw. Based on these challenges that our customers were dealing with, we decided to evolve DataHub into a broader context platform. And in doing so, we've worked on a bunch of different pillars to that platform. And I'll talk a little bit about those now. The first thing we did is we worked on context ingestion to solve the fragmentation problem. So that's about bringing together, both technical context, which DataHub has historically focused on, so connecting to your data warehouse and your dbt and your GitHub, and then bringing together that and more unstructured knowledge that exists and has been accrued at the organization over time. So building integrations with tools like Notion, Confluence, GitHub, so that we can kind of unify that in one place. Context intelligence was something we worked on as well, and we continue to work on. Obviously, there's some sources of context that have been explicitly defined and declared and maintained by humans over time. This could be your DBT models, your looker explorers, things like that. There's a lot of context that doesn't get defined, all that tribal knowledge. And so what we've tried to do is build infrastructure that can essentially look at technical context or technical exhaust from your data ecosystem. So things like the query logs in your warehouse or the logic defining your BI dashboards, and then take that and turn that into knowledge that can be searched by AI agents without you having to really do any curation work at all. The third is Context Hub, which is really a place for humans to collaborate with AI to refine the context that we've aggregated in DataHub. So refine it, review it, publish it explicitly so that we can kind of have that interception layer between all of the raw context and what the agents are actually seeing. And then finally, context activation, which is just a fancy way to say we try to make it easy for agents to search across all of the context about the data wherever the agent is running. So whether it's running in Claude or Snowflake or Databricks or it's a custom LangChain agent, anywhere that that agent is, it should be able to talk to DataHub's context layer. And so broadly, our goal is to help customers integrate, refine, publish context about the data that would enable their AI agent to effectively solve those two problems I talked about before. Finding the right data sources to use across a massive ecosystem of data in some cases, and then being able to actually query it correctly and give back trustworthy answers. This is just a little bit of a diagram. I won't spend too much time here. The main thing I want to call out is that historically DataHub has been focused on this piece in the bottom left corner, bringing together structured data and then enabling people to perform data governance, data observability, data discovery on top of their structured data ecosystem. In moving towards the context platform, what we're saying is we're essentially broadening the picture, right? The fundamental architecture doesn't change, but we're broadening the picture to include unstructured sources of knowledge. So essentially the semantics, the business understanding on top of the data, and then associating it down to the actual structured data. And then the final piece is just making that accessible. Of course, we already make it accessible to humans who are using DataHub and using Ask DataHub, but making that accessible to agents so that they can autonomously discover all of that rich context and use it as a map to answer questions more reliably. We've already started to work with various customers on this project. We've worked with two in particular. Pinterest had built a context layer on DataHub and was able to improve the performance of their agent really dramatically by giving the agent that map to the data ecosystem and giving the agent the tools to efficiently search across the knowledge base. As a result of kind of building the agent on DataHub or changing the architecture to be built on DataHub, they've seen a 10x in the usage of the analytics agent at Pinterest. So great outcome there. And then we've also worked with our friends over at Miro to try to improve their analytics agent. We were able to improve their accuracy of their agent by 2 times just by connecting their agent to this source of context about the data. And they had a very robust suite of over 1,000 evals that we used to kind of measure that outcome. So it's been great early signal, and we're really confident in the direction we're going here, really excited about what the future holds for DataHub here. So the whole kind of tagline that we're working with is without DataHub context, your agent has to guess and has to figure things out repeatedly on its own. Right? With DataHub context, your agent will just know. It'll know the right data to use. It'll know the right patterns to use about how to access the data, and it'll be able to deliver trustworthy answers every single time back to your users, whether they're technical or non-technical. Awesome. And just a quick summary of kind of the value props or the benefits we see of DataHub context and that we're kind of continuing to try to refine. Obviously, we want to help you improve the accuracy of the agent, and that's often measured through having those defined evals, right? That make sure the agent is finding the right data sources to use to answer the most critical questions at the company. We want to accelerate you so that you can, get to correctness in your agent in a much shorter amount of time than you would have using humans to manually curate all of the context. And we do that by trying to mine all of the semantic meaning that we possibly can from the technical exhaust that we have access to. And I mentioned that earlier, the query logs, right? The data models. These are all a representation of what questions people are already asking at the business and are already important. And of course, we want to make sure that your agent is reliable and consistent, right? So if it gets asked the same question, let's say, how much revenue did we make from red t-shirts last quarter? It answers that question the same way every single time, right? So we remove chance from the equation. And then finally, efficiency and cost, right? So without having context in one single place that's hyper accessible to your AI is going to go and iterate and try to find context using whatever sources it can. And what that means in practice is often tens or 20s or hundreds of tool calls to navigate all of the different tools in the business, all of the existing sources of context until it finds the right thing, the kind of the needle in the haystack. With DataHub, you can, separate the signal from the noise and make it really easy for the agent to search across all of your context with one consistent interface. With that, I'd love to hand it over to my colleague Manuela, who's going to walk us through a quick demo, and we'll kind of see how these different pillars actually manifest in DataHub as a product. I'm going to stop my share.
Great. Thanks a lot, John. Thanks for sharing the overview about Context Platform. And it was great to see from Cong how TiDB has grounded their agent in truth. And now I'd like to give you a demo of how we're handling this in action. So here I have the intent of what we're building here is to make your analytics agents more accurate. And so I'll start with, I have two agents, Snowflake Cowork, one agent which is connected to DataHub and which one that is not. And we'll do a side-by-side on how the agents are able to answer this same question: how much revenue has each product category driven in total? See on the left side, grounded in DataHub context, we're able to find that SQL context and the agent's working through that. On the right, the agent is just scanning through whatever it can to persistently get you an answer. We see on the right that it's able to identify some tables, but there isn't a join path. And so it's really not sure how it can give you this answer. And you're going to have to give it more pointers to be able to get to that answer. On the left, it's looked through and found SQL context to be able to answer this, identified a table, and then it generates a SQL to be able to answer this question. Let's see. Live demo, we'll have to give it a moment. Okay, and so here it was able to identify the semantic meaning for how to answer revenue by product category, and it is going to be generating your response. So the top performing categories are kitchen, leading by 2.84 million. It's able to find the semantic meaning and generate the SQL that it used to answer this question. Now, if we take a look at the document that it referenced, you'll see here it's answering this question: how much revenue did each product category generate? And how do we do this? So as John had shown you, there's context ingestion, right? And so we've ingested from Snowflake, looking at your query history. We've looked at your dashboards to be able to look at how you're asking questions and what you're using to, how you're answering those. And then as an administrator, I come in to the settings and I'm going to configure my context generation. So I would select by domain. So these are either you're new and you want to build a lot of context. So you're going to select those assets which are most important for your business. Or maybe you've already done some of that. Now you want to get to the next level of building context. As John was sharing, that this process can be long and we want to make this easier for you. So you select the domains, what platforms. These are the evals that you would define your golden questions with the criteria for passing. And once you've built up enough of these evals, then you can turn on auto publish, and documents that have been generated by the DataHub agent will then be made visible. Let me just show you really quick. The eval suite. So I've got several questions here. And again, DataHub, we have access to your metadata, right? And so these questions are more metadata evals, that it should reference certain assets. Maybe you have certain SQL that you want that response to produce, and those would be the pass criteria. So until you've built up enough of your evals, then you want to have a human in the loop that is going to be looking at the context that has been generated. So now I am let's say I'm a data engineer, I'm a data analyst, I'm a business expert who's able to review the context that's been generated. I go to my task center, to my inbox, and I have several documents that the agent has produced that I need to answer or review. Sorry. And so you have a summary telling you that, oh, these are unpublished, meaning that your agents are not able to view these until you've published them. We haven't found any conflicting definitions or issues with this, but you as an expert should review this. So these, again, are the questions that are being answered. And then we provide, what are the tables that you should be using to query this? What are the calculations used to query? And as an expert, I can make edits to this. I can add a comment for other reviewers to take a look at as we collaborate on how we are defining this, the business semantics used for answering a number of questions. Also, I can run evals here as another check to see, are my golden questions passing with this context, maybe with changes that I've made. I could also simulate how would this context impact answering a question right here from Ask DataHub, our native agent. So we've gone over context ingestion for bringing in the context, for generating context, the human in the loop process for reviewing the context that was generated by your agent. We showed you how you've enabled this context in Snowflake Cowork. And with that context activation piece, I also want to show you, you can access this same unified context from anywhere that your business users are asking questions. So here I have Claude, which is connected to the DataHub MCP, and I can ask a question. How many active customers do we have and their average lifetime value?
Manuela,
Here,
one thing, I don't think we're seeing your Claude if you're trying to share.
Sorry. Thank you for that. Let me find how to get to that. I thought I was sharing my whole desktop. Okay, here, thank you for calling that out. So we've got Claude connected to DataHub MCP, ask a business question. There was no semantic anchor or semantic meaning for this. So connected to DataHub, you do have the technical metadata. It's able to find this active customer lifetime value. And Claude is saying, but maybe you want to have define what active means, right? So I can provide a correction. And I say, actually, active is a purchase made in the last 60 days. That's what I mean. That's what I'm looking for. And then it updates the generated SQL. And you're also able, from within Claude or any agent that you're working in that's connected to the DataHub MCP, generate context. And then, so this could get written back to DataHub. So we have this feedback loop where it writes back to DataHub, and then it goes through that same subject matter expert review process to enable it across your platform. So we've got the 4 pillars that we're covering in Context Platform. Love for you guys to try it. Very interested in getting feedback from you as we move across our release. Thank you. I'll hand it over to Maggie now.
Hi. Sorry, I missed a second. I'm ready. I'm up next, right? John, give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, we can do a quick transition. Sorry. Let me share my screen once more. So just a quick recap before Maggie comes in and talks about where we're going of what we just saw. So with DataHub's context platform, people can come to DataHub, configure automatic context generation. DataHub will do its best to review all of the technical context that we've already ingested and then generate semantics, right? So this is business definitions, canonical SQL fragments, join patterns, common filter patterns that humans can review, accept, and publish to the agents. So once it's published to agents, agents can easily search across it, right? Using semantic search, if you're familiar with that, what that means, it's just a way for agents to search natively across the entire corpus. And it's a much more efficient way for the agent to discover the canonical SQL and the right tables to use to answer a given question. A little bit about availability for what we just saw. So the Context Platform is a DataHub Cloud offering that is now in private beta. If you are building production data agents, trying to roll that out at your company, you have a lot of data and it's hard to manage, or you're eager to collaborate and share feedback with the team here at DataHub, I would say you're a perfect fit for the private beta. You can go ahead and apply right at the link below, datahub.com/private beta request, or reach out to your DataHub Cloud customer representative, and we'll set up some time. We'd love to be in touch. All right, with that, we're going to look ahead at the roadmap for DataHub Context and talk a little about how we're going to activate some of the context you may have already in other places like semantic models and metrics. All right, Maggie, over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. John, are you going to drive slides? No. Awesome. Let me share.
I'll let you share.
So hello, everybody. I'm Maggie Hays, part of the founding team over here at DataHub to see everybody at Town Hall. There's one thing I want to call out. We are looks like there's some really great questions happening in the Q&A kind of module or whatever in Zoom. We're also, looks like we're going to have a fair amount of time for live Q&A as well. So, kind of keep those questions coming and we can go into more detail when Shashanka comes on in a few minutes. So, the stuff that we just covered around Context Hub is fantastic for kind of ongoing curation, for rapidly evolving and kind of constantly changing data ecosystems, kind of keeping up with how semantics match back to kind of physical data model. But your team may have already gone through the effort to kind of canonicalize or kind of synthesize or kind of certify, centralize all those fun words, all the semantic meaning via maybe DBT semantic models or Snowflake semantic views. And we want to make sure that for folks or for teams that have already gone through that work or are committing to a specific platform or a specific approach for kind of centralizing that human context or natural language context next to data, that we have a clear path forward for you to ingest that. So what we are working on next, and I know this is kind of a boring screen, let me pull this up here. We are going in over the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to be introducing top-level support for top-level entity support, excuse me, for semantic models and metrics within them. One thing I will call out, all of the screens we're looking at are all prototypes. They're subject to change, meant to kind of display the, kind of the concepts that we're working towards. But so at its core, a semantic model is going to be focused on kind of bringing together the plain language or natural language context about a combination of tables, while also, so kind of, up here, like just the language of, what does this represent within the business? But then also kind of actually canonicalizing or specifying how those tables join to one another. So you can think of this as kind of a combination of how the company talks about a set of joins, and the set of joins you could think of as like a different way to kind of represent an ERD diagram, right? So what you'll notice up here on the top right is the option to export as OSI YAML. One thing I do want to call out and I want to emphasize is that if you've been coming to Town Hall, if you've been seeing any of our updates around models and metrics and semantic models throughout the year, we are committed to making sure that everything that we do is compatible with OSI standards. So this is an example where maybe you're ingesting or creating a semantic view coming from Snowflake, and we will, maybe if you actually want to take that and have it be interoperable with OSI, we're going to have a really clean way to make sure that DataHub can pull things in from an OSI YAML spec, and then also export as well. So our semantic view or semantic model here, like I said, is going to be the plain language definition of, what does this set of tables mean, the set of data sets themselves, and then the set of, or basically how those tables relate to one another. And then within that, you'll notice that, underneath the kind of top level semantic model, we have some nested metrics. So your metrics is going to be where we're basically going one level further and saying one level of granularity deeper to say, all right, when I have a question about, or when I want to measure some type of thing happening over some period of time, what are the exact fields that I use on those tables? What is the exact logic that I use? Or what are the exact filters that need to be used, et cetera? If you think back to what Manuela was just showing in our Context Hub platform, you'll notice that this is doing a very similar thing of kind of juxtaposing the natural language question, so what question do I should be answered with this, alongside the technical implementation logic itself. So long story short, for folks that are already defining semantic models and or metrics within either maybe it's Snowflake semantic views or DBT semantic models, we are making sure that you'll have kind of a top level way to represent those in DataHub. We'll have everything will be available in our same kind of search and browse experience, and actually tie back to the dataset entity pages. We're also going to be working on metric level lineage, and so when you're maybe changing the physical structure of a column within a data set, you can see downstream which metrics are going to impact it. Or if you're going to fundamentally change the definition of a metric, you can see upstream what fields or what tables you have available within that semantic model, but then also downstream what metrics and or dashboards, charts, reports, all of that fun stuff might be impacted as well. So over the next, like I said, we're going to be working on this over the next, I've said Q2 and Q3 because this will bleed over a little bit into Q3 is my hunch. But so at a minimum, or first things first is we're going to have our first class entity support for semantic models and metrics compliant with OSI standards. We will be updating our ingestion sources for folks that are currently mapping in, for example, Snowflake semantic views, DBT metric models. I believe Databricks metric views. I believe we have support for that right now. Right now we have those supported in DataHub as just kind of a temporarily, modeling them as a data set. We're going to make sure that we have a clean migration strategy and all that going forward. But on top of that, this is a fantastic foundation for us to integrate back into the Context Hub platform that we were just walking through. So for folks that are working in open source and you're managing your metric store kind of in more of the, I'm going to call it legacy, just because it's not AI based, but kind of these more longer standing conventions, all of the top level model support, ingestion support will be made available back to open source. On DataHub Cloud, we're going to make sure that this has a really seamless integration with DataHub Context Platform, so that when we're kind of doing that ongoing monitoring of how metrics are defined, what they represent, how they evolve, that we are integrating back with that. So everything just kind of fits very seamlessly and nicely together. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it at that. Like I said, we'll be around for questions and Q&A. I believe, Shashanka, I'm gonna invite you over to talk about what is next.
Awesome. Maybe before Shashanka gets up here, I'll just wrap up the context platform side of the demo. So we're super excited to get this in front of you guys. As Maggie covered, there's kind of both the bring your existing metrics and context angle for the platform, and there is the generate it from scratch angle to the platform. And we're trying to really cover both sides of that story. So again, really excited to start getting feedback. If you're interested in being part of that private beta, do reach out. We'd love to be in touch. Awesome. Over to Alyssa. Hello, Alyssa. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm actually just presenting for Shashanka, so I think Shashanka's gonna go over the slides.
So exciting. It's been amazing to watch all the engagement on the chat. It's great to see that everyone wants to understand what the DataHub Context Platform is and what capabilities it has and what it's doing. Alyssa, mind hitting slideshow, perhaps?
Sure.
Top right corner. There we go. All right. And since we're all talking about context, I wanted to come in and make kind of a quick announcement about context. I don't know how many of you have been with us for more than a year, but last year, I think it was end of October, where we had our last context conference, I made a prediction that context engineering, which had kind of started as this gold rush towards making AI more reliable for application development, right? Anthropic was writing all these blog posts, OpenAI was writing all these blog posts about context engineering and kind of filling up that prompt context window with the prompts and the tools and the inputs and the outputs. And I had predicted that, okay, context engineering is important and very real, but it was going to have its management moment when we would go beyond individual teams assembling their own RAG stack or graph RAG stack or whatever they were doing to figuring out, wait a minute, we have to do it for the whole organization. And how do we actually deliver context for the whole organization? How do we manage it at scale? How do we have multiple thousands of AI agents running and sharing context with each other, recording memories back and figuring out how to do it in a way that doesn't leak context across boundaries and yet has the humans in the loop at the right moment. And in many ways, I would say the industry shift has happened this year, right? The context pitch is everywhere. If you look at our website, we call ourselves a context platform. If you look at most websites of any company that is in the data and AI stack, they are also a context something. And we thought we would, obviously have this year's theme be around the practice of context. So the context pitch is everywhere. Everyone's talking context. But what are the practitioners doing about context? Which are the implementations of context that have actually shipped to production? That's where we are right now. The prediction landed. We now have implementations that are shipping in production. And this year's conference is going to be all about the practice of context management. So we'll have the product and the engineering teams of DataHub sharing what we're building. We might even have some hands-on tutorials around building a context management stack from scratch. It'll be the kind of technical depth that most other conferences don't go into. So I'm really excited about it. And we're building towards that. November 4th, bookmark the date, scan that QR code. It is a conference for deep practitioners as well as deep thinkers. So would love to have you all join us on the virtual stage. I, of course, have it bookmarked, and we're working hard on making it an exceptional experience for all the attendees. With that, we can move over to Q&A. And I think there's a call for speakers too, right? Yeah, there we go. Yes. And we want to feature all of your stories as well. I know a lot of you in the community are not only thinking context, but actually building context. See so much chat around, very specific questions. Will it work for multiple agents? Is MCP the only interface? Are there more interfaces we should build towards? How do you build for a continuously shifting data landscape? All of these problems mean that you're working on exactly the right problems at the right time. And so if you've seen kind of some of the teams that have come up on stage and talked about how they've built analytics agents, the Pinterest team was there, the Grab team talked about, we want to showcase all of those stories, bring all of those experiences together. Whether you're building on DataHub Core or cloud, doesn't matter as long as you are building for context and you're enabling context in your organizations. We want your stories here. So please apply. We already have a few speakers that have applied. We didn't even announce it publicly. They found the link, applied. It's very cool to watch that happen. But we'd love to get more people joining and publishing and talking with us. And share session ideas. Alyssa is, of course, Alicia and Lakshay are kind of planning the whole program. So I know there's a lot of interest in figuring out the different tracks. We, of course, have some ideas on what those might be.
Cool. You know
Cool.
where to find us.
With that, are there any Q&As that people want to take quickly that have not yet been addressed? I think there was an OSI question, which we addressed. Yeah, John, Maggie, Manuela, come back up. It's been quite a rush building the context platform with these three fine folks and a large engineering team. So folks, pick on what questions caught your interest and kind of answer them live.
Looks like Maggie, you have claimed Helena's question here. Do you want to give that a go?
Yeah, so I think Helena, so the question in Q&A, and I think it was also, yeah, okay, so you also put it in chat. So is DataHub truly built for environments with a highly complex shifting data landscape where thousands of tables change constantly and critical context lives dynamically in Atlassian and Slack? The short answer is yes. So what we've seen at its core, DataHub's engineering like infrastructure is all built on real-time, high volume, high processing components. So in terms of how you bring that metadata or that context into DataHub, we have all of the kind of the knobs and levers for you to do that in a way where you're acting on metadata changes in real time. We also have, if you're within the open source code base, we have something we refer to as the actions framework, where you can act on those changes in metadata in real time, right? So I think we've landed at a spot where DataHub is like actually perfectly positioned to do this exact thing. While doing that, the other thing that we're focusing on the context platform side of things is making sure that we are processing those changes and presenting back meaningful shifts in context back to subject matter experts in a way that's scalable. What we don't want to do is kind of slam people with notifications every time there's a subtle shift in, this used to be called the US region and now it's North America. Well, maybe that's just totally fine, right? So we're always going to be striking a balance of how we bring in humans into that loop to react on things in real time. But fundamentally, yes, DataHub is built for that highly dynamic, highly complex, and rapidly changing environment.
There was a question around Bitbucket integration. I would just say, I would invite folks to contribute and collaborate with us on some of those. We are a small and mighty team, but still small, and we'd love to kind of take on the power of the community as much as possible in kind of helping us extend out beyond. I remember the Tableau integration was, powered by the community, and we've had some great success with some of those integrations as well. So, we're doing the GitHub integration. It'll be in the public domain, so you'll be able to see it, and then we'd love to have you extend that and support GitLab and Bitbucket, and we'll shepherd you and help you get your contributions in.
Yeah, and actually want to go back. So Daniel, I know that you had responded to Helena's question around bringing in Jira, Confluence, SharePoint, DataHub, maybe, yeah, and Slack. So we have a lot of those building blocks already in place to connect with Slack. We have a Confluence connector to bring in, kind of like plain language documents. But like Shashanka said, some of those longer tail items like SharePoint, that's not one where I've personally been super aware of demand, but our hope in kind of keeping all of these connectors open source is that one, it's easy for folks to contribute, build and contribute back net new sources. But then two, also continually evolve them, right? And kind of contribute when there's changes or new features in those sources and kind of helping us keep up with it. Like Shashanka said, we are a small but extremely mighty team with like the ratio of humans to connectors that we support is quite honestly shocking. So we're always open to community-driven, community-led contributions back to making sure that we're pulling in that information. You're always welcome to reach out to me if you have any questions about that. Me or anyone on the team, really, but I always like to talk about it.
Yeah. Manuela, any questions caught your attention? Otherwise, and maybe that closing thoughts from you, and then we'll wrap it up.
I mean, it's been amazing I am fairly new to DataHub, so the energy here is incredible, both from the community, from the team. Super exciting what we've been building out with Context Platform. So excited for you to try it and share feedback with us. That's how we will make sure it's meeting the needs of the community. So thank you for engaging with us on this.
Awesome. Thank you. Alyssa, round us off, and I think we're ready to wrap this up. Thank you,
Yeah.
folks.
Thank you so much for your energy, and we had so many interesting questions, so we'll keep the forum open for the future town halls. We'll see you in the July town hall, and have a great rest of your month.
Happy summer, happy winter for those of you on the other side of the world. We'll see y'all.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.